All right, so if people don't want to be on the recording, either way, visually or auditorily, then take appropriate action.
Okay.
All right, well, maybe let's see here. Maybe we can start. Make sense? Just out of respect to people who are here. Okay, well, welcome everyone to this program this evening, Getting Big Money Out of Corporations and Politics. My name is Greg Coleridge with the National Move to Amend, and joining this program this evening is Andre Walton, who's the executive director of our Wisconsin Revolution. Andre, thanks for being here. And George Penn with Wisconsin United to Amend. Each of them can, when they are on, say a little bit, hopefully, they'll be willing to say a little bit more about themselves, and then, of course, get into their work. What we're going to do this evening is just each of us will go, 10 to 15 minutes, describe what it is we do, what's our organization about, its goals, its mission, the current activities, maybe a little future direction. And then after each of us, we can maybe ask one another a question or two, but then open it up for comments or questions. And again, this program will be, once recorded, put up on the Move to Amend YouTube channel, and then shared with everyone on this call and those who registered for this call, but for whatever reason could not make it. So anyway, that's what we're doing. So welcome. I'm just going to give a little brief background of the work of Move to Amend for people who may not be familiar with the organization and what it is we do. We're a coalition of hundreds of organizations, more than, in fact, 650 organizations that sponsor and endorse our work, and hundreds of thousands of individuals committed to social and economic justice, ending corporate rule, and building a vibrant democracy that is genuinely accountable to the people, not corporate interests. We have 5 main principles and values that from the start of our organization, beginning in 2010, we have been dedicated to. George, you have your hand up? Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, Greg, I guess I was hoping you would have a couple of people. You introduced Andre and I, but the other people, maybe they could introduce themselves. I don't know if you want to do that at the end or something.
Yeah, maybe when people do have comments or something, they might want to identify themselves.
Good, thank you.
Yep, okay. Thanks for bringing that up. So again, these are principles and values that have been at the core of our organization since the beginning, when we began in 2010. Anti-oppression and solidarity organizing, very committed to understanding that we, the people, from the start have never been all the people, and we need to make sure that people who are in communities on the front line of struggle are those who are in the front line and have a legitimate and authentic and important leadership role in the formation of the organization and in the movement that we are trying to build, a democracy movement to bring about true democracy, authentic democracy, in fact, we believe for the very first time. Dedicated to coalition and movement building, recognizing that, quite honestly, we can't go it alone. No individual organization can go it alone. Grassroots organizing, yes, we need to, at a national level, align ourselves with other national and regional organizations, but also we have affiliates and chapters and work with other groups at the local level and state level, like Wisconsin United to Amend, to try to build from the bottom up education, advocacy, and organizing, which obviously, if you don't have organized money, you sure as hell better have organized people, because that's how you build power. We're dedicated to political education, trying to get ourselves and those we work with on the other side of the learning curve, because quite honestly, issues around money and politics and corporate rule, that is corporate constitutional rights, are not something that we learn about in school or even in our activist organizations. And fifth, we are dedicated and see inextricably the connection between being politically and economically independent. Otherwise, you are dependent on people who fund you, and then they feel they can steer or pull strings or push what it is you're doing. And that means you cannot be as dedicated to people who we are trying to represent, again, who are on the front lines doing work. Our goals are twofold: to pass the We the People Amendment, HR 48, to make clear that corporate entities do not have constitutional rights, never did, and were not meant to be, and that money is not a form of First Amendment protected free speech. And second, to provoke discussion and organizing about how to make real the promise of democracy through constitutional renewal that goes beyond merely the We the People Amendment. The US Constitution, We the People and Corporations, some of this may be already familiar to you, but hey, just to reiterate, corporate entities are not mentioned in the US Constitution. There's no legal foundation for them. The United States Revolution, there were a number of wrong things that they got wrong about it, but there were a number of things that were darn right. And one of them was that the revolution was in part a revolution not just against the king, not just against the king's military arm, the redcoats, but against the king's crown corporate entities that served the interest of the king this side of the Atlantic. Corporations were created and defined originally by we the people following the revolution, and public officials via charters or licenses that were granted one at a time for a specific purpose and for a limited period of time. And just as they were granted, they were routinely, in many cases, revoked if those corporate entities did not follow the authority as defined in the charter by state legislators. This was the intent, this was the norm, this was the default, this is how it once was, this is what was meant to be. And political money at the time had no rights. Money is speech, and therefore those who have the most money have the most speech. It was deemed as property then. That's how it needs to be defined now. We the people and corporations, again, corporate constitutional rights were not originally intended, despite what people say, well, it's like inevitable, it's what it is now, kind of like the gravity or tides. And it's, it's you can't change it. It can't be, changed and altered. Well, it's ridiculous. It's just as it's been created, it can be uncreated. It was not created by any law or regulation passed by any elected official of any political party in any state or any locality or any federal level, or passed or initiated by any citizen initiative in any community, in any political jurisdiction, anywhere. It was consciously and planned effort to give corporate entities inalienable constitutional rights that were never intended by corporate attorneys and activist judges. The hijacking of the Constitution by corporate entities and their compliant Supreme Court justices sort of began with the 14th Amendment, in which corporate entities won equal protection and due process. It was sort of a fake and not legitimate, since the case supposedly that initially granted it was this thing called Santa Clara County versus Southern Pacific Railroad. But that's not really true. That happened because of an unofficial comment that a clerk gave in the head notes of a decision. It wasn't legitimate. It only became credible, so to speak, several years later in 1889. But that was just the first of other hijacked constitutional amendments. It continued with corporations winning Fourth Amendment search and seizure rights in the early 1900s. That was followed by corporations winning Fifth Amendment takings rights. Corporations won First Amendment political free speech rights in the 1970s. Along the way, actually before and thereafter, they've won First Amendment rights not to speak. It's not only the right to speak, but it's the right not to speak. And then along the way, they've also won rights under the Contracts Clause to deem themselves that a corporate charter is actually a contract instead of just, what it was meant to be, just sort of something that was meant to define and authorize what companies could and could not do. Buckley versus Vallejo, as people may be familiar, was a 1976 Supreme Court decision that the Supreme Court, again, a lot of these decisions, not all, but some of them, and certainly in this case, a 5-4 decision, the court here determined that money spent to influence elections by well-to-do people was constitutionally protected free speech. And as a result of this decision, following the Citizens United versus FEC decision in 2010, just expanded that to include the rights of individuals and corporate entities to violate the intended First Amendment protection of free speech solely and exclusively for people, for human beings. Money was not, supposed to be the voices of people that were not to be drowned out by money as a megaphone. And you can see on this chart, and sorry, Clyde, if you can't see this, but I'm showing a chart that shows since 2010, it shows that in 2020, election spending was the highest ever recorded. In fact, 9 of the 10 most expensive Senate races of all time happened in 2020 in those Senate races. So money just exploded following Citizens United versus FEC, and it's gotten worse each and every year. Maybe you've seen most recently within the past, 2 to 3 weeks, it's been revealed that a billionaire, a guy by the name of Bari Said, has funded a new group to the amount of $1.6 billion, run by a guy named Leonard Leo, the former co-chair of the Federalist Society, to run this organization to basically, drown political campaigns. This guy, Leo, or Leonard Leo, was sort of at the center of Trump's Supreme Court picks, and through the Federalist Society has, been able to appoint and pressure the enactment and appointment of far-right justices that have helped, create a number of horrific decisions in the most recent Supreme Court, including ending federal abortion rights. And just within the last couple of days, we have seen that there's been an effort to try to get the Democratic National Committee to ban dark money in primaries. We've seen the impact of dark money. That's money that is not transparent, and people can hide where it comes from. In general elections, that's hard. If the Democrats say we're going to do it by ourselves and we're challenging the Republicans to do it, and they don't do it, then Democrats will feel that they are at a relative political disadvantage. So the idea being brought up by Bernie Sanders, saying billionaires and their super PACs must not be able to buy Democratic Party primaries, quote unquote. The feeling is, and the effort is brought before the DNC to, why not, encourage that dark money be prohibited in primaries. The DNC so far is resistant to that, so there's a campaign now to try to do that. So money is clearly corrupting the political system, and it's not just on one side of the political ledger, it's everywhere. So are We the People amendment that focuses on ending all corporate constitutional rights and money defined as free speech. We feel that mega money in elections has corrupted democracy, that corporations have hijacked our Constitution, and working with the judiciary are able to use it against us, that many of these things that we care about, passing Medicare for all, democracy reforms as contained in HR 1, the Green New Deal, environmental policies, consumer protection, everything else, worker rights, all require. It's hard to believe that we're going to get anywhere past first base metaphorically, unless we also address getting big money out of elections and addressing the abolition of corporate constitutional rights. So we feel that it's not just sort of a money and politics crisis, but if you will, a democracy crisis. I'll just conclude by saying what we've been trying to do and have done so far is move to amend. Nearly 500,000 signatures have signed our motion to amend petition. We have now 94 congressional co-sponsors of our We the People amendment in the House, several of whom are from Wisconsin, over 650 organizational endorsements, 700 plus resolutions and initiatives. And my goodness, George is probably going to talk about some of what he and others across the state have done there. A disproportionate number of those 700 plus have come from your fair state. Our goals this year have been to try to get to at least 100 co-sponsors, to get 1,000 what we call pledge to amend signups. Those are candidates running for office to pledge, saying that if they are elected at whatever form, city level, state level, or federal level, they will do what they can to promote the We the People Amendment, to pass additional resolutions, organizational endorsements, to do a wider and deeper education, to try to get people on the other side of the learning curve about what corporate rule is all about, to do alliance building. Earlier this year, we organized something called a radical gathering, radical being to get to the root of things. We were part of a group where we organized 29 other organizations to do a 2.5-day conference that looked at the connections between our respective strategies and work, and explore promoting state corporate code reforms. And what we mean by this is, yes, we're working on this fundamental change of trying to pass an amendment to the Constitution. A pretty heavy lift, I would say, and I'm sure you agree. But in between, sort of as a stepping stone, there are still at the state level, not just within the state code, environmental code, labor code, consumer code, but there's a corporate code, laws and statutes that have been watered down tremendously over the years, but still have some teeth to them in a certain place. So Move to Amend for the balance of this year and next year are going to be promoting and sort of teasing out and trying to find the very best states that may have the very strongest wording along these lines, if any at all have. And if they don't, then we'll try to come up with some template, sort of a left wing or popular or bottom up alternative to ALEC. And so some of the stuff that we're going to be trying to promote is a shareholder vote required before political donations made with corporate funds. Maybe something along the end of corporate 3 strikes. If a corporation like JP Morgan Chase has already been found guilty of 4 felonies, well, they shouldn't be able to do business if they have 3 strikes. A quo warranto, charter revocation, which again used to be routine, is much harder to do now. And these last 3 that are mentioned actually were at one time Wisconsin law, to prohibit corporations from owning stock in other corporations, prohibit corporations from being able to choose when to go out of business, and to make stockholders liable for a corporation's debt. So I'll just end by simply saying much of what we're working on is a pretty tough going. But you know what? Nature never gives up, neither should we. Okay, so with that, we can get to sort of questions, comments, discuss any of this later, but just wanted to turn it over now to Andre.
Thanks, Greg. I really appreciate it. And thank you for inviting me today. Also want to thank you for bringing up the Buckley versus Vallejo. So many people only bring up the Citizens United without actually addressing the Buckley versus Vallejo, which really opened the doors to corporate money. So I appreciate you bringing that up. But just to tell you a little bit about me, I graduated from the University of Wisconsin Whitewater, and when I was graduating, or in my senior year, on the midst of graduating, it was kind of middle of Donald Trump versus Hillary Clinton, running against each other in 2015 or 2016. And what really sparked me to get involved is not necessarily how bad Trump was, but how bad both our candidates were. And I couldn't understand how did we get to this point where we have to choose the lesser of 2 evils? So once the election kind of ended, I started looking more into politics, and learned very quickly that it's really easy to understand why our politics is the way it is, and it's directly tied to money in politics. It is the root of all political evil. It's something I like to say. So I started looking into it more, and I learned that, largely speaking, both parties take huge swaths of money from similar industries. And we were just talking about that a little bit earlier about banning corporate donations and primaries for the DNC. yet, so it's not necessarily a partisan thing where one party is doing it or the other. It's both plagued by both parties. So when I learned that, it really broke my reality of how I thought about politics. So when I learned that, I really started to get involved. So my first involvement with political action was getting involved with a group called Wolfpack of Wisconsin. You guys probably heard of it. It's similar to United to Men. They are a group organized solely to get money out of politics. So that's how they organize. But that was my first introduction into it. And then later on, I worked for a candidate named Mike McCabe, who ran for governor in 2018. Big thing for him was money in politics. So money in politics has always been a passionate point of politics for me, because I do think that if we want any true wins when it comes to progressive policy that really help working class people, we have to address the political root of all evil and uproot the cancer that is money in politics, which kind of led me to this point I am today as executive director of our Wisconsin Revolution. If you haven't heard about it, we are an organization that kind of started out of the 2016 Bernie campaign. A bunch of rallied up working class people who wanted to continue the movement that he started here in Wisconsin. And that's what we did. We started a working class movement based on a mission to fight for those same things, those same issues. So when it comes to Medicare for all, $15 minimum wage, all those things were such a core part of us getting started and continue those movements. But we're an independent organization, so we're obviously not directly tied to Bernie Sanders or anything like that, but we're an independent social justice organization working to make both our economy and our government a true democracy of by and for the people. And the way we kind of do that is it's a little bit different. We don't really try to overly focus on partisan ends. So a lot of groups may, partisan or organize around partisan issues. But what we try to do is focus on working class issues. We try to detach ourselves from the partisan parts. So obviously there's a lot of cultural war that people try to trigger on, especially with Fox News and things like that. With, they try to talk about CRT or, some type of book ban and things like that. But we found that we find our best success when we focus on issues that appeal to the majority of Americans. And we believe that if we want to truly combat the political corruptness of Madison, then we have to build a working class movement that isn't based on partisan politics. So whether you grew up in a conservative family, if you agree with the things that we're fighting for, and you agree that corporations shouldn't have this much power, then we want you in our movement, because we understand that if we divide and conquer ourselves based on arbitrary attributes that don't actually matter, then we'll never actually win. So that's how we organize. And it's definitely been an uphill battle, because obviously money in politics. But what we've noticed is that in Wisconsin, it's a particularly interesting uphill battle because we have gerrymandering. So we're up against money in politics plus gerrymandering, which makes it even 10 times harder than maybe a traditional state that doesn't have political gerrymandering, because you're up against maps that are unfair against their political opponents, and you're also up against a monetary value that you cannot compete against as a grassroots organization. So I want to bring up a statistic or some numbers that I found out through my just reading articles. State corporate political donations in Wisconsin have doubled since 2020. And the reason why that is significant is because the donations were already extremely high to political organizations such as the Democratic and Republican Party. So through June, just 6 months throughout the year, corporations gave over $600,000 to the state Republican Party. And then they also gave over $180,000 to the Democratic Party, which I said earlier, it's best to grease all the wheels on all sides, because if you need something done, you want to make sure you can go to anybody. They diversify their corruption, that's for sure. But the reason why this is significant is because a lot of people do not know this, but before 2015, corporate donations from donations from corporations and unions were actually banned in Wisconsin. but it was repealed by the Walker administration in 2015, which kind of opened the floodgates for more political donations to political parties, PACs, super PACs, so forth, so to speak, which has made our work a lot harder here in Wisconsin. One of the things that we're working on up in Dunn County, and this is just one example of some of the work we've been doing that is extremely difficult. One of the issues that we're working on in Dunn County is passing a referendum question revolving around national health care. So the reason why I think this is going to be particularly hard, because it's a more conservative leaning county, and I'm not necessarily worried about the people when they're voting on it. What I'm worried about is potential money coming in to crush our referendum question, because we're a smaller organization with a smaller budget. But if there starts to be corporate money to crush our referendum question, it can be particularly bad for us, regardless of our grassroots organizing. So that's one issue where corporate money can really get in the way of what we're organizing around. But there has been a countless number of things. If you go towards, for example, we've done some work with our organizing partners on the Line 5 pipeline up in northern Wisconsin, and there's so much corporate donations going, or not corporate donation, but corporate money going to these organizations to combat the narrative. And what we've seen from that is the demonization of grassroots activists, Native American people, and water protectors, just because a corporation that doesn't have any actual home base in this state, using their money and their power to influence people's public perceptions. And it's working in some accounts, because a lot of people think this energy is, and this pipeline money is going to be going straight to Wisconsin. That's not true. It's a Canadian company. So the money is not going to be going to Wisconsin residents. In fact, it's going to be going out of the country altogether. So it's things like that that mislead people, and you can see this on many different issues, whether it's Medicare for all, whether it's a $15 minimum wage. There's endless amounts of corruption and money to influence how people's perceptions are on different issues and how it's affecting organizations like ours. And that's why I'm glad to be here today, is because we get a chance to actually discuss how it's affecting us and what we can do about it. Now, what we're doing with our Wisconsin Revolution to try to combat that is we're going more on the local level. And I'm not talking about like state legislator, because we know how gerrymandered that is, but we're going even more local. We're going to local municipalities. We're going to city councils and county boards. And the reason why we've seen that more effective is because most of these people aren't paid off by corporations. They're regular working class people. They're sometimes even volunteers. They don't necessarily always get paid or make money from their city council seats. So they're more accountable to their people, which is really nice, because people focus, these elected officials focus less on the extreme partisan issues, but more about, okay, how can they adjust and fix their local budgets and what's going to benefit them and their local municipalities. So what we've seen is that they're a lot more accountable, and we can have a lot more effective work done on these local municipalities than we could on the state legislators. And it may seem like it's not doing much, but once you start getting issues done on the local side, it can start rising up nationally. And one example of that is legalization of marijuana. We didn't directly work on this, but it is a great example of how working from the local can really influence the national or the state. I think I'm forgetting the number, but there was a number of counties in 2018 that had legalization of marijuana on the referendum on the ballot, and it passed in pretty much, I think, every county. And the reason why that was significant is because it actually pushed a lot of the governor candidates to take the position to put on their platforms to legalize marijuana and fight for it. And obviously, we still have a gerrymandered legislator, so obviously it wouldn't get past the legislator. But the reason why that's significant, because now it's putting pressure on our national elected officials to really start to think about, hey, maybe this will be politically beneficial to me. So they can, go to the president and say, hey, Mr. President, we need to legalize marijuana. So it's significant. And I think working from the grassroots is a huge way for us to circumvent the endless amounts of money in politics, and really work towards a democracy that really works for all people and not just those with money and power. So we're trying to take a different approach. We're obviously going on a little bit different than other organizations, but I think in the long run, it's going to be beneficial, because once you make those grassroots connections, you can really start to build a power base. And that's what we're trying to do up in Dunn County. And we've already passed Medicare for All resolutions in Dane and Milwaukee County. So we're definitely making grassroots local wins. We're going to use those wins to push our issues nationally. So yeah, that's a little bit about myself and the organization I work for and what we're trying to accomplish.
Wonderful. Hey, thanks so much, Andre. We'll get to a discussion queries in a little bit after George completes the trifecta. George Pat.
All right, thanks, Greg, for inviting us here to talk about this and what we're up to. And so Wisconsin United to Mend and Move to Mend have been partners from the beginning, working on it together where we can. One example is the Faith Caucus that have working for a long time with Michael Green in Ohio and Move to Mend. And so we're going to continue working together and learning what each is doing while the other's working. So Wisconsin has not yet is not one of the 22 states that have called for the constitutional amendment to get big money out of politics, and so we have to work on that and get on that list. And we have a pretty simple vision, a mission, and we're expanding and improving our strategies all the time. We started in February, as did Move to Amend, February 2010, just within a month after Citizens United, and have been working locally in the communities since then. And our vision is basically simple: is we want to restore our republic or reclaim our democracy or whatever, so that the people are represented again instead of the big money funders. And in our current mission is basically twofold, and actually mirrors what Greg had said earlier. One, we want to get a state legislature to call for the amendment, i.e. we're not one of the 22, we want to be number 23 or 24 or whatever it takes. So that's our primary mission, is to get our state to make the call, and our work is based around that mission. And then the other part that's congruent with it is that we're going to be building movement along with that. We're not just out to get this legislative call. We're trying to build a movement so that we're ready to go to the next phase when once we do have the call in our state. We won't be done. We'll just be getting started into the next phase. And we have a bunch of strategies that have been changing and improving over time. The first is that we're going to continue adding new communities, passing resolutions, and we have a map and a list here, and we're up to 167 communities in 12 years. And these resolutions are the perfect action to begin the building movement. In other words, in order to get groups to work together, coalitions to be built, as I'm going to be discussing here, you have to be doing things together. You can't just be having meetings and talking about things and complaining about the issues and what's not getting done. We have to get out on the streets working together, and that is our strategy. And that's why getting referendum and resolutions passed brings the players to the street working together and building coalitions. So we will continue 167, 267, 367, whatever it takes to get that done. And so the second strategy I want to talk about is continue to add new congregations that pass our faith resolution. I discussed earlier that I was working with Michael Greenman in Ohio, and we've worked together, and Greg's been involved in that, certainly, and others. And we have about 87 congregations around the country that have passed resolution calling for the We the People Amendment. Money is not speech, and a corporation is not a person, is the simplest way to say it. And that's what that resolution is designed on. And 10 of those 87 are in Wisconsin. And we're working on a couple more with a couple more congregations to get them to pass it right now. So we're going to keep building that element or that section of society, uh, uh, which is the faith community, bringing that into the movement, religion by religion. And I'm working with a Lutheran pastor and possibly get one of those. Michael and I had worked just before the pandemic with some Presbyterian churches and got them to pass a resolution in Minnesota because we were working together nationally as well as Wayuta is working to get stuff done in Wisconsin. So the faith community is important too to get into this movement here. Third strategy is to develop and support and getting endorsements from businesses. We've developed tools. And we're trying to get people to go to small businesses. We just don't have the bandwidth yet to do that, but we've got the tools ready, and we're going to be moving into that as we find, say, a champion that will help us do that particular strategy in the future here. But importantly, a fourth strategy is that we have to continue expanding our networks. And they're needed for legitimate and durable movements. If we don't have networks working together in a coalition, we won't be building movement. So we're constantly working to build relationships for any organization that has an affinity towards an interest in reforms. This includes Wisconsin Democracy Campaign, the League of Women Voters, the fair voting groups that are popping up now with the challenges we have, a group called Voters First Wisconsin that's primarily working on Final Five voting. That's a type of ranked choice voting. Working with them, they're working with us. Fair Maps, we help Fair Maps. If you're not in our state, you don't know. We lost that fight at this point. There are things that'll be going on, but the big fight of trying to prevent it for this election, we lost. But we're going to work on these reforms again as a movement going forward. We're working with the Unitarian Universalists State Action Network. All states, not all states, we didn't have one up till a couple years ago. States have this State Action Network, which the congregations get together and work on things. And so we're working with them to try to get people to join this movement outside of the, and after getting a resolution passed by their community, their congregation. We've always had a relationship, though. I'm going to be tapping onto Andre and talking to him. I hope this year as we get going again. We've always been connected with our Wisconsin Revolution, and our Wisconsin Revolution in its platform explicitly says, therefore, this, and I'm hoping that Andre and I are going to come up with a strategy to work together to enact that. So that's another group. There's groups, indivisible. We had some people that we were working with. They're kind of fading now, but there's still some people around, and we're building relationships with them. And even if that group ends, we hope that those people will be working with us and other groups as well to get reforms. We're actually, we work with a lot of Dems that come out of the party. We ask them to take that hat off in a sense to help us. So the Dems are important because they need and they want, at least at the ground level. We know it's a little tougher up top, but at ground level in the counties, these are good people that want the right things, and reform is one of them. New group started off called Leader Ethics. That's just got, I was just at a meeting with them this weekend up in La Crosse. And there's been represent us actually had put a footprint finally in Wisconsin in the last couple of years, mostly working on voting rights issues again. And I've got a relationship now with the Green Bay Rotary Club. They're interested in working with us, and a national group called American Promise that we've been a partner to. That we're just starting to work with the Rotary Club there to actually work on the amendments. And that's a great new thing that's happened. Other groups like Wisconsin Conservation Group and those kinds of groups, we're going to keep building relationships with to build those coalitions for a long-term effort of building this thing. And so when we engage, I alluded to the fact when we engage with the Democrats, we talked to them about take your hat off, come outside of the party and work with us. And this is critical in blue and red states. It's not so important in purple and red states, not so important in blue states that it be, that they come out of the party. But when we're working against the rhetoric of the Republicans, we need to make sure that we don't get tied into the being a party kind of organization. So that's we work with them, but we don't work with the party itself. We work with the people from the party, and a lot of them get this, and we do that. Main thing, and one of the big things that we do with the movement piece, that's both the resolutions and other work, is to educate, educate, educate. We are building a movement. We are what's called change makers in movement building parlance, and that means we work at the grassroots in the local communities, just as Andre said that OWR is doing, which is very important, and it's why we make good partners. And then I'm looking to expand our outreach in high schools. I've worked with 2 teachers in 2 high schools and given I wouldn't say a presentation, the curriculum, or they put me into the curriculum to come up and talk to students in the civics class in 2 schools, and I'm hoping to get some more in the future, build on that and bring that education into the high school civics classes, mostly junior and senior classes. So those 2 opportunities really got me excited in that area, and we'll keep doing that. And then we're also giving presentations to these service groups. We got the Rotary Club, we got Kiwanis, Optimists, American Association of University Women. We're giving presentation to those groups too, to educate, get leaders, community leaders to understand that this movement is afoot and that there are people working hard to get a better democracy. And one more issue, so I don't take up the whole thing here, is we are going to get connected. And I know that OWR, and at least up in, like you said, in the Dunn County to River Falls area, we've got to connect more to the grassroots groups, local grassroots groups like they have with a group called PC, that's Pierce County Grow, GROW, grassroots. So we have to connect better with those groups and work with them on these issues and the issues that we're fighting for with this reform. As I think Anton said very well, is that we need to do this to win those issues there. So these are the most current kind of things that we're working on, changing and growing all the time here. And we're going to keep doing it and trying to get the word out so that once we get, the problem with our state is, as Andre has said, is that we have a state legislature just won't do any of this. And so we need to get better balance. And we're going to, hoping that once we get the better balance, we're going to have a lot of people involved. We're going to have a lot of communities that have passed a resolution, and then we can go in after we get that balance and get us to be one of the needed, at least 34 states. So that I think you all probably know that we need to have 34 states to force an issue to be discussed by the Congress. So that's just what we're going to do. And let's see here, saying it's just a few dedicated. Yeah. So my point here is that the way we see it is we need few dedicated people who spend a lot of time, mostly retired people like myself, who are really going to focus and keep this thing moving. And if we do that, any state could do that. If they find a few dedicated people that can bring in the people who are doing activism in many different ways, and who realize that they can't ultimately in the long term win on their issues, whether it be school, roads, CAFOs, or water. They can't win in the long run unless we have this change, and to bring them into the movement. And I think that's what we're working towards, and I'm hoping that other states are doing the same or will start doing the same to really pound the ground to get these resolutions passed, so we can get a call for the actual amendment, HJR 48. And that's all I got there for you, Greg.
Is that all, George?
That's all.
Okay.
Fast talking George. Grew up in New York. I learned how to fast talk.
I should say, hard to keep up with you. Well, thanks to you, George. Thanks to Andre. Thanks to others on the call. Why don't we open it up now? Anybody with questions, comments, just unmute yourself. Taking the cue from George at the beginning, please, identify yourself, who you are, where you're from, and if you have any questions, comments.
Well, I guess I can go.
Please.
That's all right. Um, my name is Larry Hoffman. I am a retired teacher with a PhD in education. And subsequently, I worked for the County Board of Supervisors of Milwaukee County. I was legislative aide to some supervisors. I tuned in tonight thinking that there would be thousands of people on from Move to Amend. But my main reason for tuning in was because George is on the program. I want to say that I was an activist with Move to Amend 10 or 12 years ago when I was an aide on the county board. And actually, I once got hit by a bicycle doing doors for Move to Amend. Unfortunately, you had an executive director, David Cobb, who was well respected and who I respected until he rejected my participation in Move to Amend because I was in contact at the time with Wisconsin United to Amend. And maybe that's old news now, and hopefully that has changed because I then appealed to the board of Move to Amend. But Caitlin, who was the head of the organization, and the board ignored me. So I've put my activism elsewhere. I've been a mentor for a long time now for kids, African-American kids. And I'm not really an active participant in United to Amend, although I keep up with them. And I have kept my email subscription to Move to Amend, hoping that something like this call might happen and that Move to Amend would become more all-encompassing again. So I'm glad to hear what you've had to say, Greg, and George. I really like what you've had to say in the past and tonight, and personally to me. And I'm not going to become an activist to the extent that I was before, but I'll be listening more closely now for opportunities to take part. And there are a few other people in the Milwaukee area who probably would like to take part at some point. So, and I would say, Andre, good to hear what you had to say. I believe it was our Wisconsin Revolution that had an inaugural meeting about 5 years ago in Milwaukee, and I went to that with a number of people. There was a professor from UW who was leading the charge at that time. I can't think of the man's name. He was very active, but that was a kind of a disappointing meeting and didn't go anywhere. So I'm glad the organization is still doing a lot, and especially at the grassroots level. So thank you all for letting me have my say here tonight.
Thanks, Larry.
Yep. Thanks, Larry.
So Greg, can I respond?
Oh, please.
Yeah, Larry actually, as he alluded to, he helped us get some of the resolutions we have. So thank you, Larry. And I know he's been paying attention, and I hope, Larry, that we can connect on some possible smaller things and get a resolution, because we are doing a lot of smaller things. And Larry's been a supporter, and I thank him. And Larry, to you, yes, our relationship is different. Greg and I have been talking, working together. We will continue working together. I support Move to Amend financially because I think they're an important player. And even though we had some differences of opinion on how to go about it, we have maintained the coalition attitude to work together, not only through the state caucus, but in other areas that Greg and I have communicated on. And so I encourage people to be a member of Move to Amend and to contribute. And the important thing they do that is critical that we don't do, and so they say that work for us, is they get the bill introduced every year. That's big. Every session, not every year, every Congress and session. So thank you, Move to Amend, for that. They get that done, and I wouldn't be doing it because I don't know how to do it, first of all, and I don't know who in our organization would do it. So thank you to Move to Amend for that. They're important. I will continue to support them. And we will continue, Greg and I and others, to work together. Even if David and Caitlin are gone, the new leaders there are, trying to keep this organization relevant, and they are.
And I'll just say that while we at the national level, try to work with affiliates and allies who work on the amendment, like United to Amend at the state level. We also feel it's absolutely essential to sort of work both locally, but also kind of horizontally with other organizations like our Wisconsin Revolution that are doing work on economic and social justice, who are trying to build, from the bottom up, who understand the importance of solidarity organizing and of horizontal leadership, and connect with constituencies, across the board. It's absolutely essential because, we all come at this from sort of different places and, have stuff to learn from one another. And we'll see where that relationship goes, but it's important to work with grassroots organizations like so many good ones that George mentioned, and so many others that are out there that really we need one another. We need one another because people who are working, on the ground level, sort of dealing with the one at a time horrors and harms. It's important work to be responding and reacting. Very important to do that. But at the other hand, you can't firefight forever because they're just, you're always playing defense. And I don't know about other people, but I'm tired of just playing defense all the time. If you play defense, the best you can do in sports is 0-0. That's not a winning game. At least if you're offense, you can try to outscore the other team. And so our amendment is going on the offense. It's trying to say, we need to have better players, better elected officials and better plays like rules, but we need better rules. And that's what, amendments are, ground rules. And so anyway, it's important to do all of this, both sort of working vertically and working horizontally. I don't know, Andre, if you had any response to anything Larry brought up.
Not directly to that, but I would say just kind of going off the coalition building. I think that's been one of my missions as executive director as well, is really building coalitions with different organizations, because I see how important it is. Because what we do as organizations is we tend to separate ourselves on these different issues, but in reality, we all have intertwined issues. They all correlate, especially when it comes to money and politics. In reality, every organization should be working in tandem with Move to Men, United to Men, Wolfpack, etc. Because, like I said before, none of the things that we all truly care about will actually really get done as long as the influence of money and politics is around. So that is the importance of movement building and coalition building, is to build a solidarity movement that can truly challenges the power at be, powers that control our political system. So I think it's something that's not been done enough, and there's many reasons why that isn't being done. It could be because of organizations' egos, pride, money, whatever it may be. But if we really want to have some tangible wins and effect and go on offense, like you just said, we have to build these coalitions. And that's one of the things that, and to be honest, when we did pass resolutions or these referendums or get any effective change, it wasn't just our Wisconsin Revolution. It was always in coordination with other organizations. For example, when we passed a resolution, a Medicare for All resolution in Milwaukee County, that was in coordination with Milwaukee DSA and Milwaukee Citizen Action. It wasn't just us just taking the charge. It always takes a lot of organized people to get these things done. Like you said, if you don't have organized money, you better have organized people, and this is how we do it. So yeah, it's one of those things that goes underrated and not talked about enough and not really focused on enough. But that's extremely how we get effective change done, is through coalition building.
And I saw Carl. Were you interested in making a comment or asking a question?
Well, we have a tendency with each group to be in our own silo and not want to share. And I do like hearing that people are willing to reach out of their silos and share. We need to do that. I was, again, like what someone else mentioned, I also thought there'd be more people here. I was here to find, I do believe we do need to change Citizens United. Unfortunately, it's going to be a long-term project, as you've all indicated. But we have to start somewhere. So that's what I have to say.
Well, thanks for that. Responses? Well, I'll just say, on the one hand, you're right that we have to reverse Citizens United. But there has been, and Citizens United was sort of a weird, paradoxical situation, because it's that decision that kind of launched Move to Amend, because it was such a blatant abuse and far-reaching reality of conditions that actually had gone on long before Citizens United. The powers to be, when they're smart, they do things sort of quietly behind the scenes, and metaphorically, you just sort of take a little bite at a time. The Citizens United decision, they tried to take a quarter of the loaf, if not more than that. And it became so obvious that it enraged so many people that it sort of sparked people who, within a couple of years, did a tremendous amount of incredible work. But I don't think we should be believing that we're going to go back to some democratic nirvana like we had the day before Citizens United passed, because we didn't. Communities, their interests, people were not being heard, communities were not being helped, and conditions were not being fundamentally changed. And that's because money still was a form of First Amendment protected free speech before Citizens United, and corporate entities still had these constitutional rights that were not intended. Citizens United certainly made it a lot worse, and you're absolutely right, we need to address it. But this goes further and deeper. It even goes beyond sort of money and politics. In my address, I tried to focus on some of those other things. Many communities around the country at a community level have passed, democratically enacted laws, for example, to, raise the minimum wage, or ban fracking, or, get rid of plastic bags, or just a whole assortment, trying to have reasonable gun control laws that are reasonable, we're relatively speaking democratically inspired, in some cases with ballot initiative passing those things. Well, the corporate crowd didn't like those. And so what they did is they flexed their muscle by preempting, going from the local level to the state level, and either going to state legislatures to overturn those locally passed laws, or going to court. And in some cases, like communities like here in Ohio that tried to give preferential treatment to small businesses, well, you do that, then that's a violation of the 14th Amendment against a big box chain store. Oh, you're discriminating if you at a local level are sort of providing some preferential treatment to the mom and pop hardware store. You're just violating my 14th Amendment rights, me being a huge, Lowe's or Home Depot or something else. I mean, that's for real. And so there have been equivalent things like that, where it has nothing to do with First Amendment free speech rights, but everything to do with all these other constitutional, never intended rights that are also so important to address and equally worthy, so to speak, to being abolished.
in just as a side note, I just finished reading an article about the Farm Bill and a thought of farmers, small farmers, peasant farmers, which would serve themselves and the local people, local economy. And that triggered your thoughts triggered that, because I could see that what you said, they would also use the same type of reasoning to go after this movement, to try to get to do more smaller, to get the big farmers out, to bring more small farmers in, and break up the bigger farms. I could see them using the reasoning you just promoted to combat the efforts.
You are absolutely 100% correct. There has been, this isn't just theoretical, but actual, a number of states, mostly Midwestern. I don't know if Wisconsin is one, or even Minnesota, maybe Minnesota, but the Dakotas, I think Iowa, maybe Nebraska. Many people came together to pass ballot initiatives statewide that tried to say, if you don't work the farm, you can't own the farm. Meaning it was trying to give preferential treatment to family farmers over agribusinesses. And those passed in many cases by large amounts. And when they did, then the corporate crowd, the corporate agribusiness went to court and got them overturned under the Commerce Clause or the 14th Amendment, saying again, you were discriminating against the large farm over the family farm. So I don't know if any other comments to Carl.
Well, Greg, I want to thank you for bringing us together, educate a little bit, teach each other a little something.
Well, absolutely. Appreciate everybody, and maybe some folks will connect beyond this. We will send out the video again to everyone, and see where this goes. Certainly, if you're not aware or already on the Move to Amend listserv or email, please do so. Andre, how can they reach you? People who are on the call but not on the call. How can they reach you or our revolution, our Wisconsin Revolution?
Yeah, they can reach us in a multitude of ways. They can directly email me, which is my email is andre@rwisconsinrev.com, or they can go to our website, rwisconsinrev.com, or they can
give those again. Give that email again and website address again.
My email is Andre, so ANDRE @rwisconsinrev.com, and our website is rwisconsinrev.com. They can also find us on all social media platforms. It's just R Wisconsin Rev. You can find us. We do reply to messages, direct messages on there as well. So Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter is just all at R Wisconsin Rev. And you can find us and email us. We're very active on all our platforms, so you can reach out to us anytime.
Great. And if you've not become involved with Move to Amend, you can go website. Place to go would be to sign our petition. We have nearly 500,000 signatures. That would be movetoamend.org/motion, MOTION, motion. Okay, well, thanks so much, everyone, for joining, and hope to stay in touch. If you have any questions, concerns, reach out to me. George, what about you? How can they reach you or United to Amend?
Yep, they can get me at our site, wyuta.org. And my phone and my email are plastered all over that. And it's, my email is my name, George, Penn 51 for my year of birth. I'm 71 in November. And at Gmail. And send me an email. You'll see my phone number and stuff. And that's, you can get me easily. Just put in money in politics in Wisconsin or United to Amend or something, and you'll get to our site and you'll get me.
But it's
Larry, it's good seeing you.
unitedtoamend.org, right?
What's that, say again?
Unitedtoamend.org.
Yeah, that's what, that will get there too. Yep,
Right.
I got a couple of different ways to get it. So, Larry, hope to see you around. Good to see you. I haven't seen you in a while.
Same here, George.
And hopefully, Andre, George, you can connect.
Yeah, for sure,
We will be
definitely.
connecting, Andre. I'll be getting a hold of you. As a matter of fact, I want to invite you to a presentation by Matt Rothschild going in Shreveport in October. So I'll contact you and maybe we can meet up there and come
Yeah,
up to
for
your
sure.
hometown.
Contact me.
All right, great. Well, thanks again, everyone. Have a good evening. Take care.
Have a good one, Greg. Thanks for inviting us.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Happy fall. Bye-bye.